Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the Reply webinar around Copilot Cowork. I'm really excited to get started and share lots about this exciting new tool and a little bit more about the pricing model and some of the use cases we could see this having value at your organization. I'm going to give it about 1 minute to fully get started, just to allow people to trickle in and join. I can see we already have 12 people live on the call. So some housekeeping. There is a Q&A feature on the call. Margaret and I will be sort of interchanging on different sections. So to do guide your questions into the Q&A, and one of us will hopefully pick those up. And we may have some time at the end for some additional questions as well. So I'm just going to give it another 30 seconds, a minute or so, just to allow people to join us, and then we'll get started. I'll just put a little message in the Q&A so everyone can see that. There we go. Hopefully that will have popped up for people, and you can upvote or react to any questions that others have put in there as well. And we will look to answer as many of those as possible as we go. So seeing the numbers creeping up now. Great stuff. I'm going to get started and people can join us as they jump onto the meeting. So welcome, everyone. My name is Katie McCallum. I am Senior Principal for AI Transformation at WM Reply UK.
And I'm Margaret Hahn, partner leading our AI workforce and modern work team here at Valorum Reply in the US.
Fab. And we're really excited to sort of jointly present this webinar today, sharing some insight on all things Copilot Cowork, the new agentic system layer within Copilot in Microsoft AI stack, which is very exciting. Lots of you, I'm sure, will have heard the recent announcements around the commercial and pricing model, and there'll be lots of questions about, the impact of this and how to approach this at your organization. And as such, which use cases truly warrant a metered cost as opposed to maybe some of the Copilot capabilities that you already have. So today we're going to cover a couple of things. We will do a level set to begin with on what is Cowork and make sure everyone feels comfortable with the distinction of this tool. We are then going to do a bit of a deep dive into the pricing and commercial model to explain how this will be priced, and it is metered as opposed to a fixed license fee. So more on that in a moment. Because of that, we want to get into what really warrants being a Cowork use case. So we're going to share some early thinking from us on the types of archetypes and tasks and processes that you might look to Cowork to explore. And maybe those are some early use cases for a trial or pilot. And then we'll move into some more practical where to go next. So how to adopt Cowork responsibly in terms of governance, the way that you're going to have to manage adoption with this type of tooling. We'll look at some Copilot readiness ideas as well of what you should be doing now or reviewing in terms of your user base as to who might be good candidates for exploring this. And we'll briefly touch on how we can help as well in this space. So let's get started with the basics. So what is Cowork? And here we're talking, we'll refer to it as Cowork throughout this call. We're really talking about Copilot Cowork. So this is the Cowork capability, which is the integration with the Anthropic models that's now sitting in your AI stack in Microsoft 365. So this is a new capability. It was in Frontier. So lots of you may have tried this technology when it was in Frontier and got that kind of early access, and it was free of charge during that or included in your M365 Copilot license. And it has now moved into this metered model. So I would say in some capacity, this ability to actually fully delegate a process and a task might have been what we kind of expected from early Copilot. It's certainly what I get asked in user training. Well, can it just go and actually send the thing now, or can it actually create the three outputs for me? Cowork can now do those full end-to-end processes off the back of a prompt, and you can work with it and intercept it. It's longer running. It's less chat back and forth. You can actually leave it to go and do the work while you might go off and join a call. And it really introduces that capability to fully kind of orchestrate a process. So it can actually fully complete work, not just assist with you. But this begs the question, how do we actually govern that? What does that look like, especially when there's a cost associated with it. So we're looking at possibly a really new way of working where we can delegate entire workflows. And Microsoft have this concept of a frontier firm. We have agentic co-workers, and this really ties into that idea. So we might have a team composed of several experts, and there are certain processes that get fully delegated to co-work, and certain agents maybe that execute certain processes that they're specialized in. So it's really moving forward on that AI transformation journey. There's a new opportunity here where we can really think about that end execution and kind of finalized outputs rather than just draft outputs being created and managed by the tool. And we're seeing kind of higher quality outcomes as well from that. And a new challenge, of course. When it comes to consumption-based model, we don't just have to justify an individual cost per user. We have to justify and consider and strategize around a metered cost and defining what that metered cost could look like. So just going to do a very brief level set now. Lots of you may have seen this. It's a video from Microsoft on an example. It's just under 2 minutes long on an example of using Copilot Cowork to kind of get a whole process executed. For some of you may have seen this already, but we'll just level set and then we will get into some more deeper use cases and into the commercial model shortly.
Say you're an account manager and you have a big customer meeting coming up fast. Let's use Copilot Cowork to handle it. Because it connects directly into Work IQ, it doesn't rely on connectors, which only captures fragments of data and lacks full context about you and how you work. You need the latest account updates turned into a briefing doc, usage and sales trends to dig deeper, and a presentation you can walk into the room with. That's a lot of moving pieces. Copilot Cowork doesn't just respond. It takes your full request, breaks it into tasks, and carries the work forward, start to finish. But this isn't prompt and response. You can interrupt, steer, and add to it as you go. You remember you want to schedule prep time with your team and send a status update to the broader account team. Cowork folds it into the plan without pausing what's already in motion. It checks schedules and sends a meeting proposal your way, which you can book right then and there. Then it crafts the email, which you can edit manually and hit send, bringing the power of Outlook right into the flow of work. Now let's see what it put together for us. It creates a briefing doc packed with an account snapshot and everything relevant for the room. And it keeps to your original template formatting, a presentation that lays out the opportunities and your competitive edge, and a sales and usage breakdown with graphs and charts to back it up, all saved directly to OneDrive so the content is immediately enterprise knowledge that's protected and ready for collaboration. While all of this is happening, Cowork is moving all your tasks forward at once, and because it runs inside Microsoft 365, security and compliance come built in. This is Copilot Cowork, built for real work.
Great stuff. So hopefully a bit of a level set there, and it shows an example of a full process with kind of multiple outputs, multiple inputs, and you're asking it and you're even interrupting as it goes to fully orchestrate the process end to end, produce those multiple outputs. You may engage certain skills that it's learned about the way that you want certain pieces of work to be delivered as well. So it's been framed as a kind of an agentic system or agentic engine for the bigger jobs, for those end-to-end workflows, as opposed to just a single task. And that's really where we might be pulling from sort of several inputs and producing board decks and documentation and communications associated with them. One differentiator is the ability to actually draft and send communications from where you are in Cowork. So yes, Copilot can draft you a comms, but you either have to be in Outlook or you have to copy it across. But it can actually identify, send an email to all my direct peers. It can draft it there, of course, with your approval, and actually send from where you are in Cowork. So there's lots of kind of little nuances about where it's taking it to the next level. But the real framing is that you can hand Cowork the work and it comes back fully finished or much closer to completion than you maybe would with Copilot, and you don't have to sit with it. You're not necessarily in flow inside your Office apps. You delegate a wider, broader task and set it on its way. Another framing that's useful, this is a diagram we've adapted from Microsoft, is this concept of moving from author through to orchestrator. So if we think about using a chat tool or Copilot Chat or Copilot in M365, you can ask kind of quick questions, quick answers, quick drafts, quick catches up based on your work IQ and the ways you're interacting across M365. We move into kind of editor. This is where you can draft and refine and create multiple artifacts. You can, of course, do some of this in Copilot, but Cowork allows you to take that to the next level. The process flow we just talked about is really where you start to become a director of an AI tool, where you spec out and you brief effectively, and the AI delivers like multiple steps in one go across different systems and can integrate across different systems. And then we do have this concept, this capability of Scout, which is coming as well. This is a much bigger leap. This is more moving to kind of autopilot. And Scout is another tool we're not going to focus on today, but just briefly, it kind of steps into that fully orchestrated layer where you effectively, it's constantly monitoring based on your inputs. And that can be across your desktop and your local files, across browsers, certain commands that you have. So we're not going to get into this today, but this is another technology, and there's some interesting demos out there to have a quick look at this and see the differentiation there again. So why does Copilot Cowork have everyone talking? What's so exciting? Well, if you've tried to create a PowerPoint deck or do a multi-step workflow in Cowork, you might have found this quite exciting because the level of capability does take a jump up when you're trying to do something complex from multiple inputs. So, you basically can brief a whole broader task, and Copilot Cowork, coordinates everything from pulling data initially, applying that reasoning, and as with Copilot, you can see it thinking, and it will illustrate to you what steps and reasoning it's taking as it moves. It will call upon the different tools that it needs. It will run multiple workflows over time and then deliver those completed outputs, which might be creating multiple connected files, coordinating actions, even sending communications. So we're really getting a kind of much more complex outcome and process that's being managed and fully delegated. And with that, effectively comes that additional cost. So you're effectively consuming AI compute plus the orchestration as well that's happening. So, the big question is, how do organizations like yourself maybe explore this tool, but make sure you're applying it where it's going to drive the most value? Because often when in the last couple of months in Frontier, when I first used it, certainly I was doing quite a lot of things in Cowork, which in retrospect, I probably could have been doing in Copilot and M365. And if you enable a user on Cowork, how do you guide them and how do you decide what type of work they should be doing there? So really we come to this big risk and opportunity piece, and the biggest risk is misplaced work. Running simple tasks through Cowork with unnecessary spend. Nothing guides you in Cowork to say go and do this in Copilot. The user has to make that decision themselves as it stands today. So we would be driving up unnecessary costs with little added value. But there's a huge opportunity here around that movement towards a fully AI transformed team or organization where we can look at high value work being delegated, increased quality and time consuming work being able to be delegated to the tool, and you can be working in conjunction. So I can be working and Cowork can be working on two separate tasks and sort of doubling my footprint of value as an end user. So the real question to ask is the value of the output worth that metered cost? And to really get into that, we're going to break down the commercial model of Cowork.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So now that we've grounded what Cowork is and how it differs from standard Copilot, we need to move quickly into the commercial model. So this is where customers ask questions around being really practical. What does it cost? How do we forecast? How do we prevent surprises? So let's get into that mind shift and moving away from thinking about that license feature of Copilot and that consumption-based model in Cowork. So ultimately, here we're thinking about cost, right? When it comes to Cowork, it really is focused on usage-based billing, those Copilot credits, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And ultimately, organizations need to put controls around spending and validate the analytics and make sure that the reporting is validating and justifying the use of Cowork. And Cowork really is about that genuinely high value work. And we want to make sure that that consumption is justified. So as we think about the two-part pricing model. We're really used to that Copilot license, that fixed fee, right? And when you have Copilot, it's really focused on a per user license. It's predictable. It's a fixed cost. And just like today, you get chat, you get Copilot in the Office apps, you get pre-built agents such as researcher, analyst, you get work IQ, and you get model choice. And then the variable cost here is really focused around Cowork. So that usage is paid through Copilot credits, and it's billed separately on the work Cowork actually performs. So it's really helpful for you to think about framing it as you're not paying for prompts, you're paying for the execution. So that matters because two tasks that sound similar can consume very different amounts depending on how much data is pulled in, how many steps are required, and how many tools are used, and how many outputs are created. So really think about Copilot as that fixed fee, Cowork as a variable usage that's really focused on paying for execution as opposed to individual prompts. So what drives the cost of Cowork? So there are really four main components that drive how Cowork is costed out. And so first, we have model complexity. This is about how advanced the reasoning needs to be. A simple summary is very different from a strategic analysis or a decision-ready briefing. And one of the benefits of working within Copilot and Cowork is you do get model choice. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but that does add a bit of complexity when it comes to user adoption and user knowledge and empowerment. But we'll talk about that momentarily. Next, we have context size. So that's about how much information Cowork needs to process. So one document is very different than processing a year's worth of emails and 50 meetings and 100 chats and 30 files and web sources together. So how much data Cowork is looking at and is needed for the task, that increases the cost. Additionally, thinking about tool usage, and this is tool usage matters because Cowork may not generate only text, it may call variable tools and create various outputs. So tool usage is really thinking about the output that it's creating. Is it creating a Word doc and a PowerPoint and multiple emails? So as it's coordinating various actions and working across applications, that adds complexity, which means it adds more credits and more cost. And then finally, thinking about runtime. Runtime matters because longer running multi-step workflows naturally consume more than quick contained tasks. So the point is not that complexity is bad. The point is that complexity needs to be matched with value. So thinking about drafting a follow-up email, that really should be done in Copilot. But preparing an executive briefing with multiple outputs and coordinated actions across multiple tools is much more likely to justify Cowork. So as you think about different outputs or things that you want to think about, can this be done in Copilot? Does the output that I need really justify the consumption of additional credits? And think about kind of these four pillars around model complexity, context size, tool usage, and runtime. And so as we're thinking about the success of Cowork, it won't be measured in the lowest cost. So as we think about adoption, enablement, frontier transformation, it's not about keeping your Cowork costs low. It's really about making sure that you have the highest value when you're using Cowork. So the question we want users to really think about is the value of the output worth the token costs. So in other words, if Cowork saves hours of high-value effort, improves decision quality, accelerates a revenue-generating process, or reduces manual coordination, then the spend may be justified. But if Cowork is being used for simple drafting, quick summaries, or one-step tasks, then the organization is probably paying extra for work that belongs in Copilot. And that's why value measurement and user guidance is really, really essential here. So Cowork needs to be positioned around business outcomes, not around the new shiny novelty of a new cool thing. So let's get into a little bit more about those levels of work that Cowork can do. So ultimately, we think about it kind of in 3 buckets of output. So this is a practical way to estimate cost and guide behavior. So cost grows with iteration, scope, and the number of outputs. So if you are using Copilot or even Cowork as a model to iterate, to really be a thought partner, you probably want to make sure that you're starting all of that iteration over in Copilot. And then when you get into more of the heavy duty tasks, that's where you might want to think about leveraging Cowork. So if we think about these 3 levels of work, a light task is going to be about 100 to 300 credits, which translates to $1 to $3. And so that's a simple, contained, quick to execute task. So think about inbox summarization. So looking at your inbox from the last 24 hours and summarizing what's going on. That's a light, simple, contained, quick to execute task. Ultimately, that can probably be done in Copilot, but if you were doing it in Cowork, it would cost you between 100 and 300 credits. Then as you move into more complex or larger tasks, that's where you get into medium. And this is about 301 to 700 credits, or about $4 to $7. And this is where we're thinking about structured multi-step work, maybe planning for a workshop, and you have multiple outputs or multiple reasonings that have to go in there. That's where you would consume that medium amount of credits. And then we move into the heavy duty loads, and this is where it's $7 and more. So the plus sign is really doing a lot of heavy lifting here, that it can go way beyond $7. So $7 or 700 credits is not the cap for a heavy task in Cowork. That's really where it's getting started. So thinking about that full delegation, end-to-end execution, multi-data analysis, and deck creation, that's going to be leaning towards the heavy portion. I'm going to quickly run through some of at a high level, these 3 levels of work, and then Katie's going to get in deeper into really specific use cases. So as we think about light tasks, it really should be a Copilot first approach. So when you're thinking about light tasks, this is quick, focused, low cost. So limited data, minimal reasoning, single output. Again, we want to guide users to using Copilot first before shifting over into Cowork. If it's a one-step task, a one source, and a one output, start with Copilot. When we think about medium tasks, this is where we have structured multi-step work, multiple data sources, some reasoning, more than one output. So an example of this might be create a weekly status report using the last week of emails, Teams messages, and documents. That really is something that you could move to Cowork, have Cowork building that out in the background while you're working on other things. And then thinking about the heavy tasks, this is really full delegation, high value tasks. So thinking about multi-step workflows across multiple applications, longer runtime, multiple outputs. So analyze this QBR data, build a financial model, and create a presentation. Those are all singular things that you're grouping together into multi-step workflows that all are interdependent on each other. So you want to do them all together. So if you ask Cowork to plan, execute, and deliver across multiple artifacts, you're over in heavy territory. And so when we think about Copilot and Cowork, there really are 2 buying motions. Organizations can go into a pay-as-you-go model. This is about 1 cent or 1 credit. You don't have a commitment. You can scale up or scale down. This is really great for pilots, for times where you might have spiky usage. So maybe you want to guide leaders to using Cowork during budget planning season, and you can anticipate a spike in usage there. Then you can shift into prepaid models, and this is an annual commitment. This is the lowest per credit cost, and this is for steady, predictable consumption. And ultimately, every organization needs to determine which way you want to go. We'll talk about this at the end, how we can help. We can help you think through that. But if you want to get started ahead of time, you can use the Cowork Estimator around persona-based planning rolled out by Microsoft. And this is where you can start to really think about what are the credits, what are the users, what are the use cases there, and help frame that up. But ultimately, we can help with this as well. And we help customers tune the assumptions to their own personas. And that's where we get into how we can support as a consultancy. And ultimately, the Cowork habit users need to build is that the simplest tool that gets the job done is the one that you should use. So again, reiterating, thinking about light tasks, start with Copilot. Medium tasks, you could probably start with Copilot and then move to Cowork when it justifies it. And then for those heavy tasks that you want running in the background, that's where Cowork is ideal. So a common mistake, you're going to hear this over and over, is that Cowork shouldn't be used for light tasks, such as a quick email. It's like using a full analytics engine to do a calculator's job. So the goal here is not to discourage Cowork usage. The goal is to build good judgment so users route the right work to the right layer of AI. All right, now Katie's going to take you through Cowork use cases and when it's worth it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the place to really start is what makes a use case Cowork worthy, as Margaret said. If it's going to be carrying that $7-9+ mark against it, it's got to be something that we're, in terms of the employee hours of the person delegating the work, that their time is better spent on something else, or it's valuable to be doing that, and it's going to save significant amounts of time or the ability to be strategic somewhere else. So we want to be looking for some signals from the process to indicate to us that something might be Cowork worthy. And actually, we haven't said yet, but that is the Cowork symbol over there on the top right hand corner. So if you see that flying about, that is the Cowork symbol there. So it's got to be kind of more than one of these things, multiple sources. Now, absolutely, when I'm using Copilot, sometimes I do implore multiple sources, or I ask it to look across, my communications in the last month. But here we're looking at, okay, are there sort of deep multiple sources that have really, really detailed kind of insight and information in them? And then also the same around the output piece. And this could be that communication and the ability to send and delegate work right there within the Cowork interface. So these are true. These can be true of Copilot too. So we want to look at some of the other areas here that could indicate to us that something might be worth doing within Cowork. The next is that it's taking full action. So it's kind of proffering to you what the next step should be on the journey, and it's able to do the drafting or posting or scheduling on top of just drafting. So taking more autonomous action as well as producing sort of content creation. Next is scheduled. So this could be something, and I don't necessarily mean a scheduled prompt like you would in Copilot. Absolutely, in Copilot, we want to be doing things like an end of day wrap up that you might put on a scheduled prompt in Copilot to give me any emails or communications that I might have missed. And I might want to be looking at, an end of week review of a particular project or initiative in a structured way. And I can definitely do that as a scheduled prompt in Copilot. Scheduled here really is like wide-scale processes that happen on a cadence. So that could be the preparation of a QBR or a finance report, or perhaps something that, a project document that a PMO produces, or a pack perhaps to a senior stakeholder audience, or maybe we have to do something around CSR commitments that we have to produce a report every couple of months or every year. And it's a longer form structured process that happens in a cadence where we can really use Cowork to create perhaps a skill where it really understands how to deliver our task at a really high quality rate, and it's going to do that over time. And I can really segment out a cycle of a piece of work that I do, and know that I can delegate that to Cowork on the cadence where I need it. The other thing is around high value. Now, how long is a piece of string? What does this mean? This could be different to everyone. Of course, this could be about time saved, especially of colleagues who are in very stretched teams or incredibly strategic, or maybe we're looking at trying to save their time to broaden their ability to service the organization. Maybe we'll want to reduce cycle time on some of those reports, the QBR, the finance report, and reduce the cycle time down. And maybe we could even attribute a P&L benefit to reducing cycle time. Maybe we want to increase quality or the ability to check through something by using AI. Now, this could be different for every process and every task, and absolutely in a discovery, you'd want to be really thinking about mapping out the task as a whole and identify the specific KPIs and objectives related to that task, how those roll up sort of a portfolio level to the function or team, and maybe even to the organization as a whole. And with this in mind, we've put governed. Now, governed doesn't mean that, what we're trying to get at from this is that it's been analysed as a Cowork worthy task. It might be in the future that, this is expanded, or we're looking at larger metered amount on a per colleague basis. But at the moment, anything that we want to be using Cowork for, we want to make sure that we've done the analysis in a trial to make sure that it is worthy. So we've decided and we've approved it, I guess, for high enough business value to be worth me to spend. How do we get users to do that is a question hopefully we'll come to in a little while as well. So really a good Cowork use case is a delegated job, a delegated end-to-end, not just a harder prompt. You might get some shinier slides than you would do in Copilot, but it's not necessarily going to be worth it unless it's been able to fully take steps of the process off the user's plate. With this in mind then, let's just remind ourselves what stays in M365 Copilot. So a couple of things: personal productivity, those catch me ups, those summarize an email thread, those draft a response or find the latest file or turn notes into outline questions about recent conversations or work. These are really classic assist mode tasks, right? They stay within Copilot. They are low to moderate complexity. They're immediate interaction. You tend to ask the question, get the response, and activate from there, and then you act as a human in the loop and take it to the next level. The value in these tasks for the user is that fast retrieval, is that quick synthesis and that quick drafting to save them time and reduce the time taken on specific tasks. So it's not that long running delegated execution that we're looking for here. The second really is around small scale content generation. Absolutely creating Word documents, analyzing data in an Excel sheet, comparing two documents to each other, writing a report in Word. All of these things absolutely should stay in Copilot. You can choose a different model there if you want to, but Copilot is perfect for this. It's in-app. You can be in Office app to do this, or you can be in the chat experience if you wish. And it's really going to be, it's still very strong at drafting, rewriting, refining content that you're creating that's a single focused outcome that you're looking to deliver. Third is meeting workflow optimization. Nothing really changes here if you're using Copilot and M365 actively in the org. Really taking from preparing for a meeting, being in a meeting and optimizing it by checking the sentiment. What did Margaret think of my last idea? Or maybe saying, oh, I just missed something. Help summarize the key points we made in this, or help me make sure we get back on task with the agenda. All of these things are still really, really useful. Obviously, Copilot, we can engage Copilot, transcribe or record our call and use Copilot there. And then the after as well. So the AI, using the AI recap or even some custom instructions around the way you want your meeting outputs, and then creating materials, communications or deck outputs from that. The meeting workflow it still can be highly optimized within using Copilot. The main need here is like, help me understand and draft, or help me collaborate, not go and coordinate the process and complete the work. You're still very much driving the preparation for, inclusion of, and follow up from the meeting. So Copilot is the right assist tool for the job here. Finally, the knowledge retrieval and lightweight research piece. So things like finding a policy, answering a quick question across lots of different files, email and people. So that is multi-source, absolutely. But we're asking a clear question and we get a clear response. And the output the answer is the output, and we're kind of one step on from the output. And that's where we really should be focusing on Copilot. It's really retrieval and answer focused work, some analysis as well. Cowork would be overkill in lots of these scenarios, and it becomes justified only when the research needs to be turned into a package of deliverables or maybe trigger action after the research is completed. But lots of great value, and there's loads of capability still being poured into the licensed Copilot and M365 capability every day. And I'm sure you'll have seen the distinction now than 6, 12, 18 months ago in terms of what you can get out of your license fee here. So let's think about the type of archetypes in comparison of what should be in Cowork. We sort of indicated this before. So it's really that multi-step, multi-artifact delegated workflow with the outcome being executed and not just sort of document creation. The steps are, the push for the communication or push for an approval happening as well. And this is justified in the cost, or hopefully you'd see this justified being in the cost, because you're not just buying sort of better writing or better output. You're replacing manual process stitching across different apps and sources by having it all orchestrated in that single layer. You're not having to go to lots of different locations to do that. Not just prettier text, but orchestration across systems by default. And kind of speaking to some of the ideas we had earlier, this idea of recurring scheduled packs, briefings, and updates that need to be done to a high quality and in a really highly structured way, where you can teach Cowork the skill to do this on a cadence, and repeatability of these type of tasks when you're initially exploring Cowork is going to give you some confidence on the metered cost as well of what credits you're going to spend. So I would certainly suggest that these are a good option for Cowork trials is to try and look at some of these examples where we do it on a cadence. We can do some trials and tests to see the number of credits consumed using different models. We can teach Cowork the skill, which helps reduce the credits consumed. And we can say, okay, if we're going to do that with this team every month or every quarter, what's the credit consumption going to look like with Cowork there? And then it's around the deep research. So in contrast to what we just saw on the Copilot archetype, we're really seeing when the deep research is not just retrieval based, not just some kind of summarization or comparison or pulling in the headlines. We absolutely can do that in Copilot or the research agent. But what about when we need to turn that deep research into a decision ready package for a stakeholder? So we do the research and then we activate that. We need to communicate. We need to create PowerPoint decks. We need to analyze additional data into comparison to the report we've created. So this is really all about multiple steps, as we've said, and we've said that a lot of times already, but that's where the Cowork really comes to light, is starting at research, but 5 steps down the line, you've had to have minimal input. You can be getting on with your work, and it's already getting to that decision-ready package at the end. So I'm going to just whiz through these very quickly. We've got some use case ideas that I certainly would recommend having a look at in a trial setting that align to some of the archetypes on the previous slide. So things like sales and account intelligence, things like research, proposal creation, RFPs, RFIs, maybe repeatable processes that relate to a request in from the business to a certain team, and then things like finance or PMO packs that are operating packs that run regularly. And often these things take a lot of time when we see people prepare for a QBR or a finance review. So these are some good examples, and we'll just quickly do them now. But why these first? They illustrate some of those key tenets and signals that we saw about what's Cowork worthy, and ultimately they impact P&L. So when we're going to be spending metered credits here, I'm not saying this will always be the case, but I think it's going to be useful in early trials to be looking at areas that are cost rocks in the organization, highlighting where those are and seeing where we can use Copilot in a structured way, and we can truly look at the ROI against the P&L impact as well. So just a quick whiz through these 3 as to why we've pulled these out. So the sales account intelligence piece, Cowork can help pull account context, has access to Work IQ. It can look at emails and meetings, spot and follow up gaps, create those customer packs, drafts and next step comms in a scheduled cadence way with certain customers based on certain signals that you teach it, which is really, really exciting because obviously the time of a seller, effectively it can directly generate revenue. And rather than having to interact with Copilot every step, we can have this complex sort of review of a customer and a creation of the relevant outputs done on that cadence. And really, that's going to help us with the value measurement, because things like prep time reduced. We're going to look at quality and consistency of the output, which might have relied on human effort before and may have seen some inconsistency as well. We can really look at reducing kind of pipeline review speed as well. And then maybe we're looking at, we can target different types of accounts for sellers based on whether we see them at risk or whether they're in a really positive state, and we can adjust the co-work approach based on the type of account as well. And what we're looking to do there and measure is that likelihood to sell, shortening the sales cycle, which obviously again has that direct look upon revenue too. Next is this research proposals RFP type workflows. You could apply this to lots of different things. This is really a pattern as opposed to it has to explicitly be this task. But anywhere where we need to research internal previous work and synthesize and look at maybe market research and account context, maybe where we need to produce things like briefings or executive decks or communications associated with it, and then maybe actually complete a structured document with certain fields that have to be completed every time. This is a good example for co-work, and again, using those co-work skills, you can get co-work to be better every time at understanding what type of things you want in your output. So we really want to be looking at something like this. And again, pulled this one out as an early stage trial use case because this tends to be revenue generating or impact product as well. And things we can look at is analyst hours saved, faster turnaround, reuse of internal material, quality of source synthesis. And again, this may lead to increase of revenue or being able to track the quality of the proposals. If we can increase proposal or RFP quality or anything that goes out to your customer by 10%, we should see that coming back in revenue as well. So something else we've been looking at. Final one, and then we'll get more into the how to get there, is around sort of finance PMO packs, these internal sort of forecasting operational packs that often take significant amount of work and very manual in their capability. If we can build a workflow that sits around this, that really, really understands what inputs are needed, runs on a cadence, pulls recurring source files, reviews messages and updates from your files, from your emails, from your meetings related to a specific topic, building that ceremony narrative and insight, creating the pack outputs as they need to be structured using input templates that you may have created before as a draft, and then really, really looking at the communications that sit alongside that as well. So the stakeholder updates, even the the invites to the meeting where you're going to walk through the pack. You could ask your co-work to do all of those things in one broader process task. And then, of course, this does take it a step further. This is really considering something that's on a cyclical nature that needs to be modeled in a specific way, and you don't want to be asking it to do this every time. You want to be looking at the sort of 5-6 steps related to this pack, reducing the time that it gets to senior stakeholders. So we could be looking at reducing cycle time, reducing manual handoffs, consistency and quality of the packs that are created. And then we can, it's something that we could look at the credits that are consumed on a per cycle basis and look at this as a pattern in one team and look at where that pattern might apply in other areas of the business as you consider scaling where Copilot might have value. Great stuff. So final thing, I guess, is just as a headline, which hopefully is sung through the examples we've shared, is this assist versus execute narrative. And the key directive really is to treat Copilot Cowork as a metered execution layer inside the broader Copilot stack, not as a better Copilot. And the real decision that users have to make, which is the challenge, is which work should stay in the flat rate Copilot layer and which work should be routed to Cowork, because it is truly that delegated multi-step, multi-source, high value impact that's going to justify that usage-based metered spend.
Awesome. So when we think about all of that complexity, the next thing we want to think about is adopting Cowork responsively. So we need to address the most important question: how do we adopt it, and how do we do that thoughtfully, responsibly, and through a way that is focused on governance and manages for success across your organization. So when we think about adopting co-work responsibly, we've really looked at this through the lens of three primary pillars. So adopting co-work is a little bit different than some of the other AI transformation opportunities that you may have seen in your organization, such as Copilot. Co-work really starts with that governance piece. You need to make sure that you're thinking about access controls, cost controls, monitoring, ownership, chargeback models. Every organization handles the charges around co-work a little bit, or Copilot a little bit differently. Some organizations, there's a cost center for Copilot, and that cost center pays for all of the AI licenses. Other organizations will charge back to the departments. Maybe IT pays for Copilot upfront, and then departments reimburse IT through a chargeback model. So you really need to think about that overall governance and strategically align across the organization. And part of the reason why you want to do this is you want to make sure that you're guiding the M365 admin on how to set up cost controls, so those controls aren't solely in their hands. So governance is really, really key here. And then shifting into thinking about an operational model. So our recommendation is to start with testing things out first, around readiness, maybe some pilot groups, measurement, and defining what value realization looks like, and validate that organizational readiness. Now, both Katie and I, our background is adoption change management, and so we're always an adoption first approach and have that there. And when it comes to adopting co-work, it really is having the structure, validating that you're getting the value out of the people who have access to co-work, and then starting to think about how do you roll that out across the organization. Do you want to? Do you want to put in readiness, pilots, and required learning and certification within your organization in order to unlock the value of co-work? So there are lots of different ways to really approach that through the adoption and operating model. And then once you have that figured out, really thinking about that user guidance and adoption. So honing in on that Copilot first mindset, thinking about tool selection and making sure that people understand that, and then that value awareness. So the goal here is to enable people via knowledge and ability to drive value awareness and which tool when alignment. Now, one of the key things that gets a little tricky is when you get into co-work, you do really have to know the different models. You need to really think about what your outcome is. What are you looking to execute? And that's a lot to put on the users. So making sure that you have centers of excellence around where people can learn more about the different models, stay up to date, have a champions program that really facilitates that. And the key takeaway here is that consumption-based AI requires that governance model, and it's not just a flip the switch and then do a quick rollout and then you're done. So why do we talk about governance before adoption? So that assumption-based AI requires that governance model before the rollout plan. Co-work adoption stays cost effective when it's planned, controlled, and measured. And so you want to think about within that governance access, who gets it, why, under what conditions. So right now, co-work is off by default. So if you haven't turned it on, great. Now's an opportunity to really think about your governance, your adoption, and admins have to enable it. They also have to set limits and monitor usage. So when you think back to that governance conversation from a moment ago, it really is about making sure that leadership in your organization understands what those limits are and guides the admins on how they need to enable it and what those limitations are. And so when you're thinking about that cost control, you want to think about spending limits, alerts, making sure that there's reporting and monitoring. You can use the Microsoft cost estimator tools, and then you can kind of anticipate some of the model expected usage patterns and understand through pilots and persona-based use cases what people in your organization will facilitate what kind of workloads. And then ultimately, this is key in any governance. You want to make sure that there's an ownership model. Who is the owner within your organization of Copilot? Who's the owner of Cowork? Who's the face of all of this AI, and making sure that they're also empowered to understand the really fast moving world of Copilot and Cowork and AI. And Cowork adoption stays cost effective when it's planned and controlled. And now when we think about that Cowork adoption, part of the challenge here is that users don't really need to learn Cowork. They need to learn judgment. So there's a lot of complexity, as you've seen throughout this conversation today, that they need to understand which tool to choose. They need to be guided through knowledge and ability around when to use Cowork, when to use Copilot, when delegation is appropriate, how to review those outputs, how to look at something critically and determine, okay, great, this is a really good output, or gosh, that really hallucinated, or this doesn't mean anything, how to manage approvals, and how to balance that cost and value. So when we're thinking about Copilot adoption and planning for it, that Cowork adoption succeeds when the right users are empowered to perform the right work with the right controls, governance, and visibility. So we have lots of tools and approaches to take folks on that Cowork journey. And it starts first with that estimation and that governance, then thinking about that cost monitoring, having a cohort of pilots to really validate the specific use cases to your organization, evaluating that usage, throwing in champions in there as well, validating the governance, control, and ownership across the organization, and then measuring the ROI and demonstrating value and validating those success metrics. So it's not just a moment in time, it really is an ongoing journey that starts with cost control and governance, and transforms all the way to people usage and adoption. And so when it comes to Cowork, it's all about the right tool for the job. So when you think about how do you plant a flower in your garden, first you have to dig a hole. How are you going to dig that hole? You can do it by hand. Great. But then your hands are all dirty. Is that the right tool for that job? Maybe you want to use a spade or a digger or a shovel or a really big caterpillar crane in there. All of those tools can get the job done, but are they really the right tools for that job? So I hope that you're taking away that we're hitting home on Cowork is super, super valuable. It's really used for those multi-step workflows, aggregating multiple documents and data sources, that complex analysis and output that can be doing work while you're focused on something else. And then you go back and check it and validate and kind of ladder up on that. And then you want to use M365 Copilot for quicker, faster, easier tasks like drafting emails, quick summaries, iteration, brainstorming. And just because Cowork can doesn't mean that it should. So we really want organizations to hone in on identifying the right use case for the right tool for the right role. And what have we learned from adopting Copilot and Cowork? That most AI initiatives will not fail because the technology is bad. There are lots of reasons why AI transformation initiatives fail, and oftentimes they fail because organizations give up when initial expectations didn't match reality, and when the governance and adoption isn't in place to ensure that people are set up for success. So challenges are rarely around licensing, deployment, the tool itself. Challenges are usually expectations, enablement, confidence, habits, demonstrating value. So AI transformation, whether it's Copilot or Cowork, isn't just about enabling a feature. It's about helping you move through the disillusionment and into a sustained business value. And it's not just a singular moment, it's an ongoing and continuous journey. So Katie, take it away around Cowork readiness.
Great stuff. So yeah, to close us out, just thinking about that trial piece and how to actually get moving with this. We've thought about the guardrails, we've talked about the adoption challenges here, and hopefully some good insights from how to start planning for this. But if we think about, who to start with, what small pocket of people might we start a Cowork trial with? And really, it starts with AI maturity. This isn't going to be an enterprise-wide tool anytime soon. And we know that your enterprise, as soon as a tool is launched, is scattered in terms of its capability and maturity anyway. You might have some people on Copilot and M365, some people on Copilot Chat, some people barely using AI at all. And actually, those that we want to be looking at Cowork for, we want to look for teams and user groups with some of these qualities. We want to be looking at people with strong M365 Copilot usage already. It's already quite a significant upskill to take someone to being able to build like longer form power prompts and doing some really deep integrated work in Copilot. To then level that up and really be able to, with the adoption challenges Margaret shared about the user having to know which tool when, we need a really clear capability in the core licensed tool already. We'd also want to be looking for areas where we have clear examples of value from AI supported work already, and maybe they've already seen that and there's advocacy and sponsorship in that area, and those teams are already seeing the value. We then want to be looking for the processes that we can be delegating to Cowork. So where are those repeatable high value coordination or reporting tasks, using some of the examples I shared earlier, particularly great if they align to a P&L benefit as well. We want to make sure that people have a level of confidence working with prompts and outputs and the ability to do that human in the loop piece. So really, building on that idea of strong M365 usage, are people able to revise and refine their outputs? Because that is a really core skill, is being able to identify and rewire your own processes and seeing where AI fits before we try and apply a new metered tool on the top. And then, of course, we need a business owner willing to measure value and usage. As with Copilot impact reporting, it is a challenge. It always relies on the end users to actually play this back. The usage data can only tell us so much. We want to be able to doing things like A/B testing, doing proper process mapping where we can identify KPI objectives that may not even relate to the process we're moving to Cowork, but because of the reclaimed time, that reclaimed time influence a KPI and objective over here. So we need that engagement from the business sponsor, from that team and function, that they're really going to engage in this. They see the benefit and they're willing to give up some time to do that early measurement. This measurement piece is going to matter more than ever now because we need to get some really, really clean, clear views at the metered spend. If we're looking at the trial approach then and we're working with a team, we wouldn't want to look at those specific use cases when we're doing that wider kind of discovery. We want to ask kind of three key questions, really. First is around need. So does this use case clearly exceed that assistant mode we talked about earlier? The second is data. Can it run mostly with M365 data first or with light integration so the pilot can start quickly when we're looking at Cowork trial and measurement? And can we measure outcome per credit clearly enough to decide whether to scale? That could be because of the process itself or it could be because of the engagement that we're getting from that team. And then having a clear value framework. So you can see lots of the areas we talked about earlier around complexity, business value, repetition, coordination effort, time saved. We want to see high scores across all of these in the use cases and the teams we're considering to be looking at delegating this to Cowork. There will be teams that you might come across in this trial where actually some of the things they're doing already could be elevated with better, deeper integrated use of Copilot in M365. This is a continuous evolution. We work with teams all the time that had foundational training 18 months ago and haven't realized the latest, greatest in Copilot in M365. So we want to make sure that we're capturing that as we go. And you can see this kind of visual on the right-hand side, a bit of a sweet spot, is these high complexity, high business value tasks. And I guess it's worth me saying as well, there will be lots of people out there who have Copilot M365 but might not have explored the agentic capabilities or built agents for those teams and functions. Absolutely, we recommend going through a Cowork trial, but these will be opportunities to really map out the way that work is done, and there may be more cost-effective ways to use agentic AI than Cowork for some of those processes, so do bear that in mind. And ultimately, so who do we enable with this? It's not just who wants it. It really needs to be tasks and processes that justify the spend of Cowork. We've talked through this light, medium, and heavy capability. We're going to keep doing exploring. I've struggled to find any light cases that justify Cowork yet. But we're going to keep reviewing that and sharing more information from Reply on this to see if we can identify some really typical Cowork use cases that sit in this light and medium category. But ultimately, we want to make sure our Copilot and M365 use is strong and users understand that which tool when. And that they're asking things like combine these 5 documents, extract insights, and create a structured report. And that's when Cowork's going to really deliver that true value. So really, licensing decisions should be driven by finding the users who do the work that's going to drive the most value from the tool. You're on mute, Margaret, if you can hear me.
So wrapping it up, thinking about how we can support you on this journey, how to get started with Cowork. We think about focusing on those targeted use cases, understanding the task complexity, putting controls and governance in place, and then doing a trial and test before scaling. So Copilot helps people work faster. Cowork helps your organization get work done automatically. And ultimately, we think you can't do that alone. And so we recommend working with us, as always, because we're here to help. So we can help take you through a phased approach, starting with assessment, moving into design, then pilot, and then scaling across the board. This starts with validating the value, assessing your organization, designing a model that works for you, making sure that we're taking users on that journey, and then scaling across with that governance, refinement, and value realization. So in today's session, we talked about a lot, and we dove really deeply around how Copilot assists and Cowork executes, and really hit home on how Cowork should be used selectively for delegated multi-step work, and the value should really justify the metered credit consumption. And the best use cases are high value, repeatable, and multi-output for Cowork. And governance, cost controls, and user judgment are essential. So start small, measure outcome per credit, and then scale responsively. And we've got you covered. We can help you with that. So your call to action today is first, a thank you. Thank you for being here and taking time. And then we're here to help. So you can always reach out to Katie in the UK or me in the US, and we can help you on your Cowork and Copilot journey across the board. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll talk to everyone really soon. We'll have a readout of and a recording of this session that you can always revisit. And I'm sure we're going to hear from each and every one of you with kudos and questions, and we're here to help. So thank you.
Thank you so much.